Just resigned from my dream job after experiencing disability discrimination. Let's talk about it. This is part 4, but if you missed the other parts, I made a playlist and I will go ahead and link it. Also, yes, I know I'm not wearing glasses. Being out of work has really messed with my concept of time. And also, I don't like wearing glasses around my house. It's a whole thing. It's fine. Everything's fine. So where I left you off was the day before the first day of school, which was the Monday that my schedule got changed at the request of the school district, and a bunch of additional supports, I guess you could call them, were put into place without my knowledge. So, the first day of school was a typical first day of school. I'm in denial though. Okay, I am going through it like, please let my schedule change. Please let me wake up and my schedule will be changed. And I won't have to do this schedule that I don't like with a bunch of preps and a bunch of co-taught classes. But needless to say, that did not happen. I feel like this is the part of the story where it's really important to mention that the kids are not the villains in this story. Do I laugh hysterically every time I see the numbers between 5 and 8? Yes, I do. Because, it's just one of those occupational hazards of being a teacher, of teaching that middle school age. But, did I get called grandma by a kid? Yes, that also happened. But, the kids are not the problem. This is a story of adults and adult biases doing wrong. The kids can be taught, and the kids, I think, were taught to not be the way that the adults in this situation were. So the kids are not ever going to be the problem in this story. So the first week of school is a typical first week, lots of syllabi, lots of getting to know the kids getting to know us. I have no idea what newbie is going to do on a day-to-day basis, but I am able to give her a lot of grace with that because I understand like the first day, the first week, it all has to be really flexible. And I'm okay with that because I come from elementary resource where we don't usually have kids the first week of school because we are setting up schedules and doing all the things. So I'm okay with that. So the first week of school is the only time in the history of my existence that I would ever use my 2 preps effectively. I made myself a nice little caseload cheat sheet with all the students on my caseload, like when their APs were doing stuff. But it still wasn't sitting right with me, this schedule. I started noticing very quickly that my usefulness to newbie would diminish over time. So the first class we would teach together, we would teach pretty evenly. We would do things 50-50. The second class was probably more 75-25. And the third class, I was like, why am I even here? I feel like an aide with a master's degree. So I noticed that my usefulness to her diminished over time. It also occurred to me around this time that there was actually a paraprofessional being put into the one little period a day when I would have kids by myself. They started pulling one of the behavior self-contained paras until my friend behavior teacher said, stop. And then they pulled the security guard in, and they just kept like switching whoever it was, and they were doing a whole lot of nothing, which is partially my fault because I wasn't telling them to do anything in particular, but I also didn't need anything particular to be done. The thing that I had the paras do when I taught elementary resource was doing a lot of small group work with students, and I didn't need that. Because the time that I had kids in my classroom was pretty independent work for everybody, and I could monitor the classroom by myself, and I could manage all of the behaviors by myself. There were no really significant behaviors, unlike the school that I had just left, where I had a kid who did have significant behaviors. There were none of those in this case. So that was a whole thing. Put a pin in that, because we'll come back to it. So the first week goes by, we have our first PLC meeting. The kids left early on Wednesdays and we stayed for an extra hour to do planning and things. And what immediately stood out to me about this meeting is that newbie sat with me and with the person that swapped my schedule. And she was talking a lot to that person who was supposed to be her original co-teacher. They seemed to have great chemistry, but I could not get a word in edgewise into that conversation. She really did not want to plan with me. And it was so noticeable that I had stayed behind to ask my admin something mundane, and he ended up talking to me about it. He was like, how do you feel about the English department? How do you feel about the school? How do you feel about being included here? And I told him, I said, she's not planning with me, but we'll see kind of how it goes with the first week and everything being behind us. And, I said again, like, I have 2 preps. I don't know why, because most of the school did not. Most of the school didn't have a prep at all. Newbie and OG both didn't have preps. So I was like, this just isn't sitting right with me. Can we do something about me having 2 preps? And that admin said, yeah, I'll make some calls. I'll see what I can do. So I was a little bit hopeful that things maybe would change. I mean, it was still early enough in the school year that things could change. So I talked to that admin. Around this time, they also were having trouble finding somebody permanent to put in my little period that I had with kids. The special ed department chair who taught a self-contained class approached me and said, hey, do you want one of my pairs? I said, no, please. And she said, we would offer the support to anybody who asked. And I said, yes, but I did not ask. It would be different if I saw the people around me receiving the same support, but without asking, but, I didn't ask. I don't really want a pair at all. I feel completely capable in this situation. And she did not seem very pleased with that piece of information, but she took that back to admin anyway. And I got the best time that I ever got with the kids. The behaviors were down because they only had me to listen to. And they were listening to me, and they were, for the most part, being respectful. They were the most settled that they ever were in my time at that school, when I had nobody in my classroom with me. So we then have curriculum night, and the only reason that I'm going to talk about curriculum night is because I got to meet OG's family. Shout out to OG's family. I know none of them are probably seeing this, but if they are, hey. So how that shook out is I told OG that I was not going to go home because I live 20 minutes away. And she's like, oh, I'm going to dinner with my parents and they live 5 minutes away. You should come with us. So I did. It was a really good dinner. They were really cool people. But what's also really important about me meeting with OG's family is that they were all a line of teachers. So they understood the school system in and out. And when I told them my story, OG had told them pieces of it. But when I told them my story, they agreed. They said, this is probably discrimination. Something sketchy is happening here. This is also when the idea to resign occurred to me because I was feeling really apathetic toward the situation. So we have curriculum night, and then the English department, except for OG, decides that they're going to teach this lesson about the R word in preparation to read this short story, Flowers for Algernon, which didn't use the R word at all, but it's fine. So if you've never read Flowers for Algernon, the 2-second summary of it is that a man with an intellectual disability gets a operation that makes him superhumanly intelligent, and there's a bunch of consequences and fallout from that operation. It's a fun story to read while you're experiencing disability discrimination, let me tell you that. I can make a whole video just about the spiral that Flowers for Algernon sent me down. So at this point, Newbie is still not planning with me, so I have no idea what this lesson is going to entail, and let's just say that lesson, made me cry. It made me cry because my people were not called that R word, but my people did still get institutionalized, and the just generational disability trauma was really hard for me to watch in action. It was also really difficult because in our first class that we taught together, we had a student who was disabled. He was a brilliant student, but he was very negative toward himself, and we had been working with him all throughout this first month of school to decrease his self-talk, self-harming type of behaviors, and that lesson triggered them right back up. And that made me really upset. So I talked to Newbie after the second class that we had with that lesson, and I said, hey, this lesson is really upsetting me. I don't know where it came from, where this lesson came from, that is, but I'm not liking it. Also, can we do something about it? Can we change it? It just so happened that the admin that was directly in charge of 8th grade ELA walked into OG's room, and that's where I ate lunch with OG and a history teacher friend. And the admin walked in, and I told her about my concerns as well. And so she came, she observed that lesson, she saw how it went. I sent her the template for it because we did have a shared Google Drive, but that doesn't mean that, I knew what OG was going to use, Newbie was going to use, because she wasn't planning with me. So after observing that lesson a couple days later, I went to talk to that admin and I shared all my concerns with her. I said, I have too many preps. I don't really know how to use my time better. I don't really feel like I'm being valued here, and Newbie's not planning with me. So she agreed she would talk to Newbie and see why Newbie wasn't planning with me. I would find out that information kind of on my own. So sometimes the way that PLCs work is special ed will do their own PLC and then English will do a PLC separate from us. And that happened during the first month of school. And after that PLC, OG seemed kind of bothered. And then a day later, she told me, she said, Newbie has been talking. And Newbie said that she didn't know what to do with me because I'm blind. And OG said that she tried to advocate for me, and she said that, we just do everything digital. But Newbie wasn't hearing it. So I found out that I was being talked about by the classroom teacher that I spent most of my day with, and that she didn't think I was competent either. And I'm going to end part 4 right about here. Come with me for the next month of school in part 5.